Hello and welcome to the HII Method. My name is Jen Hatz. I am the host of the HII Method podcast and the founder of the HII Method. The HII Method is a holistic, integrative, and innovative approach to assessing and optimizing human health, well-being, and performance. And I'm partnered with Neuroforce One, a human performance company that has been churning out champions for years. They have a in-facility, in-house training and assessments, as well as a remote option. And I'm excited for another chance to share with you guys some of the dark side of misinformation related to hydration. I know it just saying that sounds like a conspiracy theory or like the beginning of a sci-fi novel, but there really is more to the story. There's more dark side to it. So to bring you back from what I discussed on the last episode, I shared some pieces of the puzzle, some history, if you will, from my professional experiences working with a program where there were some outdated beliefs about hydration, and it led to some pretty dangerous interventions being used, some pretty dangerous or misleading attitudes and beliefs about hydration, and it was putting athletes at risk. It was putting athletes in danger. Now, some of the danger that I witnessed was, believe it or not, it was quite literally life and death type of situations. This goes beyond the initial fear of just being dehydrated, or the fear of cramping, or the fear of maybe just not performing well. This is quite literally, I will stress this to the end of time, critical information when it comes to hydration, that it is life and death. Understanding proper hydration and how your body is responding to what is going on around you is the absolute pinnacle of how you function, how you are capable of continuing to function, and how you are able to progressively move in the direction you intend to move, whatever it means, whether it's physically moving or mentally or emotionally getting past a hurdle in life. Your ability to respond to what is going on around you because you know how you are functioning or dysfunctioning, if you're in a state of dysfunction, in response to what is going on around you, and then choosing to change different behaviors and choosing to make those new decisions externally outside of you so that way you can have the response that you intend to have internally. Now, when it comes to what could be happening inside of someone, outside of someone, when it comes to hydration and seeing some of the dark sides of things professionally, I'm going to first take it back a little bit to, there was a very particular experience when I was with this program that had some very outdated attitudes and beliefs about hydration. And this was like the absolute moment. So up to that point, I was building momentum. I was really getting a lot of emphasis, a lot of positive support around me from the players, from different coaches and personnel, really seeing the difference in having this shift of perspective on hydration, on how to best approach it, how to best be in control of those situations, because that at the end of the day, being able to empower others to be in control of their decisions is like the greatest potential growth. Like that's where all potential growth lies, in being able to promote and encourage and empower others to make those decisions for themselves, to better progress themselves. Like that's huge. That's what we need to be spreading out there, spreading positive reinforcement, encouraging people to do better for themselves. That being said, so going back to what I was saying, so I want to go back to the dark side, the dark story of this hydration reality check that I was kind of having. I kept coming face to face with this like outdated belief or this kind of like big scary monster that no one else was really addressing. And I'm like, I got to be the one to address it. I got to be the one to, to bring light to the situation so that we can conquer this big, dark, scary thing. Probably the scariest thing that I witnessed firsthand, witnessing at this program, was during camp. It was during the heat of camp, but I mentioned this a bit in the last episode, how everything kind of came to a head during this point in time. So it was during that training camp in the heat of the summertime, and I was making progress throughout the summer, and I witnessed, for me, what was like the absolute end of the line, like I'm stepping in right now and asserting myself right now to do something, because what I saw was an athlete that came off the field and was being guided through by athletic training through a body cooling uh, regimen and body cooling technique that really was not so. So I talked about hydration and about how your body uses water in order to remove excess heat from your system. That's how your body's protecting you, because if your core temperature is elevated, that can absolutely cause cellular dysfunction. It can impact and impair your cells from actually being able to function. Your cells can actually swell up and burst, and that's not good. If you can imagine, that's not good for just the cell itself, but then the cell's not being able to function, that's an even worse problem. And when that's happening in critical areas of your body to keep you alive and functioning, that is very bad. That is like I don't want to make too light of the situation, because it's quite literally critical to maintain your ability, to maintain your core temperature. Like if you had an overprotective mother when you were younger, who if you had the slightest fever, they were like taking you to the hospital. That's because your mother knows that you are at risk of some serious uh, dysfunction within your body. Your body's in serious risk when your core temperature is elevated, when that body temperature is elevated. That's bad. So your body will use that water. It will sacrifice water in order to protect itself. It will do that for you. Now, this body cooling technique that you already have, your body already knows how to cool itself down by doing this, by sweating, by being able to remove heat from your system, bringing that to the surface, and then removing it from your system, right? When you are, especially in this case, when you are in the heat, in the humidity, when there's a lot of extra moisture in the air, that can trap all of that body heat in, because the sweat that you have maybe beating up on your skin isn't able to actually evaporate. So if that sweat is not evaporating off into the air, that means that the heat that would have transferred into the air then is still trapped onto you. It's still stuck to you. It's still stuck on you. But so that heat being still trapped inside is not the goal. We want to remove that excess heat. We don't want to trap heat inside of our body. We want it to be able to remove off of our system. So part of proper body cooling techniques, especially when you are in the heat of, let's say, August camp, or even just if you are living in an area where it's just hot outside all the time, some of the first steps that you have to go through in order to properly cool your body down includes, first, you got to get out of the direct sunlight. You have to come out of the sunlight into the shade. That was something that at this facility, there was no shade anywhere. The entire field, everything was in broad, like right out there in sunlight. There's no speck of shade anywhere. So you were in direct sunlight for the entire length of practice, even including before and after practice, because there's always the extra stuff that you have to do, right? So you're in sunlight, in direct sunlight that entire time. So you don't have a chance of getting into shade. So that's step number one, is getting into shade. Once you are in the shade, you're immediately cutting that heat factor down by stepping into shade and cutting out the heat factor from the direct sunlight. Then you have to start working to cool down your core temperature from the inside. So that means you start to take in fluids, first of all, because you're replacing fluids that you just lost in order to remove heat, but really emphasizing on those cold ice fluids that you're taking in, because that ice stimulus, that cold ice stimulus, especially if you can just have ice or really iced down drink in your mouth, man, that sends a signal to the whole rest of your body to cool down safely and quickly and properly. So in the shade, start cooling yourself down, taking in a lot of iced and heavily iced down drinks. And this is the time then when you're also taking off like excess clothing or padding or anything. Remove it from your skin so that your skin can evaporate that heat off and remove the excess heat. So these are kind of the layers of the steps that you want to move through for proper body cooling techniques so that you are not shocking your system. What I saw in person and this is a well-established program, and what I saw was the most frightening thing for me. And immediately I knew I needed to absolutely step up and step over some feet if I need to like make this known within this program that what they're doing needs to change. What I saw and what I hope is not occurring in other programs, but very likely could. So this is why we need to address this. They had ice tubs, which is a common thing that you see, especially on social media. Everyone loves to see these ice tubs and how tough people are by getting into these ice tubs. It's awesome. It's really tough. Cool, man. I love it. Maybe part of your recovery protocol that you have some ice tubs in there, maybe a contrast tub. So you're moving from an ice tub to a hot tub and back again. So that way the act of the hot and cold water is helping to move blood through your system. Cool, man. Let's implement it into a recovery technique program, a recovery protocol. But it's not body cooling after a workout. So here's what I saw that happened that I want to address again, because I'm fearful that others might be doing this and not knowing just how dangerous it is. I saw they had ice tubs directly off the field in the parking lot, still in direct sunlight. So you have the field in direct sunlight, you have the parking lot in direct sunlight, and you have these ice tubs in direct sunlight. So I saw athletes coming from the field, walking off the field, taking off their pads and stepping directly into these ice tubs. So they're still in direct sunlight the entire time. They have not yet started to hydrate or get anything inside of them. They're just now starting to take off pads and immediately plunging into ice cold water. If you can just imagine what that does to the body, and I'm not kidding when I say this. So one of those athletes that was doing this, and they were being guided from athletic training to go through this thing. Yeah, go to the ice tubs, you're fine. And I said, no, don't do that. This athlete gets into the ice tub, submerges up to the neck in ice water, and he passes out. And he is out cold. I mean, not to make light of the situation. He's out cold. He's passed out in this ice tub, submerged up to his neck. And a medical practitioner, the team doctor, comes out with an IV to come and administer an IV. Again, this is all in the direct sunlight. They have not yet moved into the shade. This is still in the sunlight coming off of practice. On the heat of the asphalt of the parking lot, submerged to the neck in ice water. And this team doctor comes over and starts trying to administer an IV while he's still submerged in ice water. And after however many minutes, however much struggle of trying to get an IV going, the athlete finally starts to wake up enough. And this is maybe 20 minutes in total when the athlete was awake enough then that they finally pulled him out of this ice tub and started to move him inside, and they walked him inside. I cannot stress enough how absolutely shocking this was for me to witness this happening, because it was occurring in a way that it was very normalized and accepted. And you almost heard some snickering behind me about, oh, there's another IV, there's not so what I want to address is that, first of all, there are very frightening realities that are happening at all times. And there are things that sometimes we see that blow our minds to see it in real life. And whether or not we feel like it's our place to say something, whether or not we feel like maybe if this is how they do things, this is okay here. No, there's never a time to allow something to happen that absolutely is wrong. Or even if you just feel like something is wrong and you need to say something, you have every right to say something, to step in, to if you have to overstep your boundaries, if there's some outdated belief that because of your position that you don't have the right to say something, absolutely not. You have every right to say something, because that individual, in this case, their life was in danger because no one was saying anything, because what was happening was so normalized and accepted that it was allowed to happen. It was being enabled. That is the problem. That is where we have to remove this fear of change, this fear of identifying something as wrong. We have to remove the fear so that way we can implement the appropriate approach, so that we can find the healing that comes from shaking things up a bit. So luckily, I say luckily, because nothing adverse happened for the athlete. He was actually able to come out of this and recover fully. Luckily, this for me was the absolute last straw for me to implement some changes in the program. And as I then took the reins, if you will, I said like absolutely no, anything that is related to hydration, anything related to cramping or IVs or body cooling, any of this comes to me first. Like I'm sorry to pull rank here, but I'm pulling rank. Like I'm the one in charge now. I'm captain now, right? No, it wasn't that bad. But so I did have to overstep boundaries a little bit in order to ensure that the absolute health and safety of everyone is prioritized. And by doing that, by approaching this in a way that I have no choice, I'll put my job on the line if it means that things are going to change here. And what do you know? Luckily, I say luckily because things started changing. And over time, it took time because you're changing attitudes and beliefs, first of all, and that takes time. But over time, the positive changes were monumental. And this entire program shifted in the most like amazingly positive direction where all of a sudden there were no more IVs being administered or relied upon. There were no more athletes questioning or asking for an IV, thinking that it's going to be the answer. There was no more of the absolute high risk behaviors taking place because we as a team collaborated on shifting everything in the appropriate direction, knowing that we wanted to prioritize health and safety, knowing that we wanted to put the health and well-being of every individual first. And that was huge. It was the greatest positive turnaround to that otherwise very dark story that the dark side turned positive. And I could not be more proud of the change that happened in that program because of that, really after that instance and the momentum that we started to really gain from it. Now, there's another dark story that I'm going to share though. And this time it's not professionally something that I've experienced when it comes to hydration and the need to act in order to correct something. But this was actually a personal dark story related to hydration that actually, if anything, solidified for me the critical nature of identifying individual differences in hydration. So my own little dark story, my own, shadow work that I've had to pull myself out of. So despite having this extensive background across hydration, knowing the ins and outs of hydration, how to take care of others when it comes to their hydration, how to track the hydration intake and output of others, and how to encourage and transition the behaviors of others, it was my own hydration at the end of the day that put me at risk. So I don't know how much of the story I want to give because there's like so many details and I don't want to like confuse too much, but about 2 months ago, this is, I just looked at the date now. So 2 months ago today, from the day that I'm recording this, it was 2 months ago that I was experiencing some symptoms that I've never had before. But I've known, thankfully, luckily, I knew enough about how to track and monitor certain symptoms, certain whatever, that in the moment I identified this immediately as emergency, immediately as a hydration related emergency. And I actually drove myself to the ER, which I don't mean to laugh because it sounds terrible, but for whatever reason, I was able to calm myself down enough. And for whatever reason, the logic at the time was like, I don't have time to wait. I'm going to drive myself to the ER. So I drove myself to the ER and made it there fine, thankfully. And I was admitted to the hospital for 2 days for what is called hyponatremia. And this is low blood sodium. And I was hospitalized for 2 days, being under very strict, you're under very strict monitoring and very strict clinical, they're clinically monitoring you and controlling every little thing that is coming in and monitoring what is coming out because they're trying to correct this. So what it is, this low blood sodium. Well, first, let me start back from what I was experiencing first that I knew was an emergency. I had been sick for a couple of weeks before that. It started with like a viral infection, a respiratory viral infection that felt very much, I was like, man, I got like bronchitis or something. Like there's something. It felt like there was a lot of just stuff settling in my chest. And I think I lost my voice for a couple of days at one point. And it was a real heavy, real like bad uh, viral respiratory thing that I was experiencing. Coming off of that, as soon as I started feeling better, I was oddly enough having these adverse reactions to just anything, any of the household, like cosmetics, lotions, face wash, everything was, I was having this adverse allergic reaction to things. And it was the most bizarre, sudden shift in basically my immune system responding, being hyper responsive to everything. And I could not make sense of that. I'm like, why am I all of a sudden allergic to everything that I own? And what do I do about it? So because of this, because I was having these weird, just like hyper immune reactions, it was like I was having like basically hives all over my system, all over my body, in response to things that if I was like washing my face, my body would break out in hives. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. This is not normal. These are the normal things that I use. This doesn't make sense. So I knew that there was something off. There was something going on. And in order to try to control for the symptoms, these kind of allergy looking symptoms that I was having, I started taking Benadryl, which is just an over-the-counter antihistamine. And it's common for, as you know, for an allergy relief thing. So I was taking that to try to control for these symptoms that I was having. And after a couple of days, I all of a sudden one day, this was literally like 3 days maybe, and that morning I started having full body tremors. And that's never happened ever. Never had anything like that happen before. And it scared the life out of me, but it passed. So I had these full body tremors. I was like just barely holding on to the counter to hold myself up. And after a couple minutes, it passed and I felt fine. And I thought, that's weird, but I feel fine now. So I kept going about my day. And I went to the gym. I was doing things. I was working. I was doing things. When I came back from the gym and I was starting to hydrate after going to the gym, the body tremors started again. And this time, it was not just body tremors. I was starting to get super dizziness, confusion, almost like my eyes were almost blacking out. I felt like I was going to pass out. And I had the absolute strongest feeling of thirst that I have never had anything close to this feeling of thirst, as if I am going to die if I don't take a drink right now. Like, it was the most alarming, frightening feeling of like impending doom related to thirst. Like, oh my God, I'm going to die right now. And I knew at that point that I drank way more than enough. I knew that I was not dehydrated. I knew that, like, I know how much I drink on a daily basis, and I know that there's no way I'm dehydrated. If anything, I think I'm drinking more than I normally drink today. So I knew I was not dehydrated. I knew that the tremors, my whole body shaking and convulsing, was bad. And I knew that the tunnel vision, the blackout, was bad. And so, like I said, I'm not proud of the fact that I drove myself to the ER in this state, but I knew immediately from all of that, something is wrong. It's hydration related, and this is beyond my capacity at home. I need to get to the ER, and I need to get there now. So I gunned it to the ER. Thankfully, I made it there just in time. The ER doctor, they immediately took my blood. They started me on an IV, and then they immediately stopped the IV, and they said, okay, we just got your blood results back. You are on fluid restriction, absolutely no IVs, nothing like that. Your blood sodium is dangerously low. And had you not come in when you did, had you stayed at home and tried to manage it on your own at home, things could have gotten a lot worse. You could have absolutely had brain swelling leading up to a coma. So hearing that news, first of all, I felt immediate, I cannot stress this enough, immediate relief that I was correct in identifying something that was absolutely life-threatening in the moment, and that I made the right decision to go to the ER. So I was like in tears, in relief that I was there and that I didn't try to muscle through this on my own at home. Like the feeling, there's no way to describe that feeling of feeling like, oh my God, I listened to my gut feeling on this and it was right. But coupled with the absolute, for lack of a better term, the ironic feeling of, this is literally what I do for a living. I focus on hydration. I focus on what others are doing for their hydration. This is what I do. This is what I know. How is it possible that something like this happened to me? And it was the strangest feeling of relief, knowing that I knew enough to act and to act accordingly. And also this confusion of how is it possible that I've neglected myself this entire time? And it was like a weird guilty feeling, if anything. I'm like, did I do something wrong? And what I found afterwards, so after being released from the hospital, which by the way, there's it's difficult being in the hospital for something like this. So to treat hyponatremia, it means that your blood sodium is too low. So to treat this under the hospital, like under their guidance, under their strict watch, you are purposefully dehydrated. So they purposefully allow your body to lose water in order for your blood sodium levels to just naturally elevate in response to, really just in relation to the body water. So as your body water content is lowering, your blood sodium levels are naturally elevating, right? So it's just you're removing water from your system, or allowing your body water content to be removed without being properly replenished. So you are purposely being dehydrated. And so in those 2 days that I was under the hospital guidance for this, and they have to heavily monitor this because a change in your body hydration, a change in your body water, and a change in your body electrolytes is absolutely critical. Like, they could not legally allow me to leave the hospital until this was corrected, because it's a major liability, because it's so critical. You could literally die, and this happens more often than people recognize, that a shift in your hydration, a shift in your electrolytes can lead to heart attack, stroke, death, coma, you name it, like the absolute end of the spectrum of risks. So I was under heavy monitoring this entire time. They had me hooked up to a heart rate monitor. They were purposely dehydrating my body this entire time. Within those 2 days, I lost 11 pounds, which is like insane. And I've never been that emaciated. I don't have 11 pounds to lose, right? It's like there's that much water and glycogen, and everything that you can imagine in my body is just gone, absolutely gone. So I am at the absolute most emaciated I've ever been in my life. And at that point in time, my blood sodium was elevated enough that it was no longer characterized as low based on the diagnostic criteria. So because I'm at the threshold for normal blood sodium, that means that my diagnosis has therefore been treated. This is kind of how the medical model works. You have to meet diagnostic criteria in order for you to have a diagnosis. That diagnosis has a diagnostic code that is billable to insurance. And really, it's the diagnostic code matches with a treatment that, in this case, the hospital is providing a treatment for this diagnosis I have, and that's what's billable to insurance. So as soon as I no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for that low blood sodium, as soon as my blood sodium is normal or threshold normal, that means that I'm no longer needing to be treated for it. So therefore, there's no reason, I'm not, there's nothing that is billable to insurance at that point for me, for my condition. So I have to be released from the hospital. This is the reality that we come to face now with the medical model, is that your state has to meet some criteria of a diagnosis in order for your treatment to be fully realized. So at this point, even though I was emaciated, I could have met the criteria for malnutrition diagnosis and been able to stay at the hospital a little longer for them to try to feed and hydrate me, but that never happened. So instead, I was sent home. Thankfully, I have enough of a background of this exact thing, of how to refuel, rehydrate, how to feed, how to maneuver that recovery process from a very severe dehydrating time, and how to properly rehydrate. So I was able to get back to my normal functioning within a couple of weeks. Really, it was difficult because I couldn't approach it like a normal rehydration strategy, because I still had to be mindful of the fact that my blood sodium was only just barely threshold for normal. So I couldn't overdo it right off the bat and try to regain all of my water and water weight and everything like right away. So I had to taper into hydration, which meant that the recovery process was the absolute most painstaking, painful thing in the world. I do not recommend it for anyone. But sharing the story though of having something occur that really just it shocked me, if anything, because it was something that I was not expecting would ever happen to me, and yet it's something that I work with others. Now, the interesting thing about this condition, having this low blood sodium, this hyponatremia, it's not abnormal. It's something that there are, hospitalizations for it. It's not an abnormal thing to go to the hospital for this. The thing is, there are certain situations where it's more normal. So it could be like in chronic alcoholism, for instance, you can tend to see hyponatremia in chronic alcoholism. I don't meet that category at all. The other end of the spectrum, it could happen in athletes that are endurance athletes, especially where they're taking in more plain water than they are electrolytes. And those two ends, I don't fit that category either. And that was something that like the entire time in the hospital, they kept asking me, they're like, well, you look really fit. Do you work out a lot? I'm like, yes, I work out. Yes, I'm fit. Do not put me in the category of endurance athlete of over-consuming plain water, because that is not me. I don't meet that category. I understand what you're thinking because that's what you read in your textbooks, but that's not the situation here. And I explained to them also the fact that, and this is also something that's very abnormal. My late grandfather, he's no longer around. He also was at one point hospitalized for hyponatremia. This exact situation that I was hospitalized for, he also at one point in time was hospitalized for the same thing. He also did not meet the typical profile of someone who wouldn't be hospitalized for it. He and I are very much alike with how we live, with our lifestyles, with how we nourish and feed and hydrate ourselves, with our mindset. He and I have a lot in common like that. Like I said, he passed away a while ago, a number of years ago. So I don't have the ability to have a conversation with him about his experience with hospitalization. But something that is really unique, besides the fact that that in itself is unique, the fact that there's a potential family link, he also had Parkinson's disease, which is a neurodegenerative disorder. He's absolute fabulous story about him. So his Parkinson's, when he was diagnosed, he decided that he was not going to succumb to the disease progression. He was gonna maintain his functioning, and he, through his mindset, through his lifestyle factors, he was a phenomenal hydrating. He stayed physically active, and he stayed mentally active, mentally acute, like attuned to life. He was constantly had this like constant thirst for knowledge. Let's use thirst as like a joke here, but he was so adamant about maintaining the lifestyle, this active, healthy lifestyle, and he actually kept his disease from progressing further for over a decade and a half. Like, he maintained his functioning for such an extensive period of time. It was almost a medical anomaly that there was a lot of talk from different universities wanting to study him because of the fact that he was able to completely hold off this disease progression based on his lifestyle, based on his mindset, based on how he approached his decision to say, you know what, I'm not gonna, I don't want to, I don't want to lose my functioning. I don't want to lose my cognitive processing. I don't want to regress. I don't want this disease to progress. I'm going to hold off on it because of how I approach myself in my life. Now, near the end, there were some interesting things that happened with his health near the end. And I have quite a theory. I want to keep the story sort of short because I don't want to go too much into it because it's going to make me emotional. But he at one point had a fall and he was in the hospital healing. Older individuals have falls and they especially need to be hospitalized when it is like a hip or I want to say it was his pelvis. So he was in the hospital. During his hospital stay, there's a belief, it was either during the hospital stay or when he was then placed into a longer-term care facility, that he was not being treated well and not necessarily being provided with what his body needed, especially from a hydration standpoint. his Parkinson's massively shifted, and it was like the disease was progressing rapidly. Right before our eyes, disease was progressing rapidly. And it wasn't until, I want to say, he was brought back to the hospital because his health complications were getting so bad that he needed like actual hospital care. And at the hospital, they said, well, he's severely dehydrated. And it was like a light bulb at the time, even, that he was not receiving the treatment that he needed fully, that his body was familiar with, that his body and mind would have responded best to. He wasn't receiving what he individually needed. And he ended up passing away. But because of his entire experience, that entire situation, how it played out, that stays with me very strongly for a number of reasons. It stays with me for a number of reasons, but especially to identify the fact that there's most certainly, absolutely these individual differences in what we may need and how to best take care of ourselves. And if we're not identifying what these individual variations truly are and what we personally, individually need, then we may be at the mercy of just the system of recommendations, right? We may be at the mercy of what someone else knows or what they think they know about us. And in this case, it rings true even closer to me, because for me to experience something that I can already see that there's a potential family link between there's of course a family link between myself and him, but there's also a potential link between hyponatremia, or in this case, I'll back up. There's a potential link between an inability to maintain your electrolyte concentrations. So it's this is all potential, right? There's research there, but we don't yet have an ability to identify it in ourselves, like at home kind of thing. But there's a genetic mutation in the sodium-potassium pumps, that very critical part of your body and how your body functions and how your body maintains its hydration status. There is a genetic mutation that has been found in research in the sodium-potassium pump that is in fact related to a form of Parkinson's called dystonia Parkinsonism. And for me to see that there's a potential link there, and that my hyponatremia that I experienced, the major symptoms that I was experiencing that I knew for a fact, like, this is bad, it was the full body tremors. It was my full body having these convulsions and tremors, which is in itself characteristic that's characteristic like Parkinson's tremors. And it immediately flagged in my head, like, something here is wrong. And there's a potential genetic link between it, and it's a potential individual variation. Something else I also want to make a note on my experience, I mentioned that one of the other most alarming symptoms that I had that drove me to the hospital was the fact that I had this insane thirst that I had never in my life had before. If you can imagine the worst dry mouth, the worst cotton mouth you've ever had, coupled with this impending feeling of doom and oh my God, I'm going to die if I don't have a drink. Like, this is the end. This is how I go. This is it. And that feeling of the strongest thirst you've ever had, coupled with the anxiety about it, was what drove me to the hospital. I come to find out a few weeks later, talking with a nurse practitioner who was actually very well versed in, I was telling him every little thing about what I was experiencing, all the layers that go into it. And he was the first person to identify something that no one else at the hospital identified. And he said, well, if you were taking Benadryl during those few days leading up, you very well were having an adverse reaction to the Benadryl, because you were already having an adverse reaction to everything else that you were taking and using. All of these otherwise normal parts of your routine, you were already having this adverse immune reaction to these things. You very likely were having an adverse reaction to this over-the-counter medication, Benadryl, because the first symptom, the first side effect of Benadryl is dry mouth. And I'm like, mind blown at that point, because immediately I thought, oh my God, like, there are so many things that we are going through our day-to-day about without recognizing the fact that we may be having an adverse response to something that would normally, under normal conditions, we'll call normal conditions, would not faze us. And yet we are so susceptible to any little changes in a good way, though. This is a good thing because it's identifying something that is different that we need to pay attention to. So in this case, I was having an adverse reaction to something that I would normally not have this reaction to, but I was having this adverse reaction. And it just highlights the fact that we are constantly, continually in this dance, coexisting with our external reality. Our internal reality is constantly responding to our external reality. And it's only when we pay attention to what is going on externally and how we are responding internally that we then know how to change our decisions, how to change our behaviors, how to make new changes, new decisions, new behaviors for ourselves, because we know that we don't want to have that response. So this entire situation for me was like, oh my God, it was like the sparkling lights at the end of this long road, like finally coming to terms with the fact that, oh my gosh, everything that I have known and studied about the body comes down to this fact that there's this individualized nature, that absolutely everything about you is completely unique to you. And it's a combination of your genetics and your lifestyle. And that your internal environment is constantly responding to your external environment, and it's going to communicate to you in that way. So you have to learn the language that your body's communicating to you. And on top of all that, just the importance of hydration and just how absolutely critical it is for your functioning, starting above the neck. How crazy is that? So that's a little insight about my own little dark personal story. But I don't want to continue going down the route of dark personal stories. So we're going to wrap that up for today. But I hope you all enjoyed hearing that. And I would love to hear just any feedback from anyone and everyone about any personal experience you've had where you came face to face with this realization that something you were doing that seemed normal or seemed something that maybe you always were doing before and never thought about it, how it was like all of a sudden one day it wasn't working. Something clicked, something in you was responding in a way that you never responded before, but that it opened your eyes to it. And you saw for the first time that what you were doing maybe isn't what you need to continue to do. So I would love it if you all shared with me your own experience, your own little personal wake-up call whenever and wherever you've had one, because I'm sure we've all experienced them. I hope I'm not the only one who's experienced it. But I thank you all for joining, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. All right, bye.